Running a snow business isn't getting any easier, but you don't have to figure it out alone. Join us at Grow Snow from Snowfighters Institute, where you'll learn proven strategies to improve sales, operations, hiring, and profitability from contractors who do it every day. Invest 2 days now to build a stronger, more profitable snow business. Register today at snowfightersinstitute.com. Hope to see you there. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Snowfighters Institute podcast. My name is Phil Harwood, and I'm your host today. And I'm very excited to have with us Robert Holmes. He is the founder of Spectrum Weather and Specialty Insurance. And Robert, we've known each other for many, many years, but it's been a while since I've really gotten the fresh update on what your business does. And I've always been super fascinated by the services you bring to the industry. And I know you're involved in other industries. You know, we're going to be talking about snow specific, but let me kind of welcome you. So thank you for being here. Let's jump right into it. For someone who has no idea what Spectrum Weather Insurance does, tell us what you do.
Well, Spectrum Weather Insurance, we are, first of all, an independent insurance brokerage. So what that means is we work with several insurance carriers, but our fiduciary responsibility is to our clients. And so my job is to seek weather insurance solutions for our clients. And that can take many forms, but it's really about a company that's formed about insurance solutions that are all weather-based. You know, of course, here we're talking about snow, but we do other types of weather as well and different industries, et cetera. So it's very niche and the market isn't broad. You know, there's some very, kind of carriers that are large in scope, but their input into this is relatively small from how much time and resources and money they have to put in it. But, our job is to initially consult with our clients and then seek coverage for their solutions.
Okay. And it's really important that people understand the difference between an independent broker and someone who's not independent. Can you kind of explain that in layman's terms?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to what they call an agent, even an independent agent, anytime the word agent, they're an agent for an insurance company. Okay, they're tasked and given certain latitude and authorization by an insurance company to sell insurance. An independent broker is tied to no individual carrier and has no requirement to do so much of this type of insurance with this carrier, et cetera. They're completely independent. So that gives our clients access and the freedom to seek the best coverage possible. So it's independent means, I can work with anyone, and I do. And but if you're not an independent, you are tied to that particular carrier. Many of you probably have your homeowner's insurance with an agent for a company, and some go through an independent agency. But even an independent agency there's still agents for the carriers they represent. A broker is their fiduciary responsibility is to their clients.
Yeah. Thank you. That's an important distinction. So weather insurance, what is this? Because when I first heard of it, I thought, is Robert like trying to predict the weather? Like what's going on here? So again, layman terms we can understand because we're just contractors here. Like what is this stuff?
So, when we're talking about the snow industry, we are primarily talking about an insurance policy that would pay a claim if there is an extreme winter, and that can be extremes in either way. So you can buy a policy, for instance, that if you don't get a certain amount of snow in Chicago, that policy will pay some predefined dollar amount for every inch that the actual snowfall is below your insured threshold. Okay, and that's a real basic policy. It can also be done on the excessive side. So you can have a policy that, if you get more than 60 inches in Chicago, that policy will pay $10,000 per inch over 60. Again, a very simple example, but also a real life example. Then you can start getting into, other types of coverage, but it all comes down to one basic premise, that the claim is predicated on the amount or occurrence of natural snowfall.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's very clean in
Mm-hmm.
that you don't have to show that in order to receive a claim that your salt usage increased by 60% and prices were up 40%, so you're out a total of X number of dollars. It's much more cleaner than that. It is literally, did it snow enough, yes or no?
Mm-hmm.
If the answer is no, what was the total? Do a quick math problem, and there's your dollar
Mm-hmm.
amount. Okay.
And you're saying snow, so you're not saying ice or some combination, or are you? Okay.
I am not.
Okay.
The challenge with ice, ice is nice when you think about it, because you salt a lot during ice events, and that produces profit.
I've never heard anyone say ice is nice until right now. That
Well,
just happened. Okay.
Well, I tell you what, if I'm driving,
sorry.
if I'm a contractor, I would, those ice events are nice if I have to go throw salt, 3 or 4 times.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, I'm sorry I interrupted. Go ahead.
But the idea is that ice isn't measured historically, right?
Mhm.
You can't go back and say on January 20th, 1992, how much ice did we get? You can see
Right.
there was ice, but you don't know if it was just a little bit of ice or there was a half inch of
Mhm.
ice. Was it freezing rain, sleet, etc.? So it really kind of gets into the weeds of trying to put an insurance policy around that. So if we
Mhm.
stick with snow, that's measurable, it's quantifiable, and there's plenty of historic information.
Okay, got it. So I do have a follow-up question in terms of that, because who is measuring the snow and where the snow is being measured and how it's being measured can vary dramatically, depending on if it's National Weather Service snowfall data at the airport versus a site or from a private contractor. So in your world, with what you're doing, how does that work? How do you decide what the source document is for the actual snowfall total?
Yeah, it's going to depend a little bit on the type of coverage and the location that we're looking at. Now, I gave the example of Chicago earlier,
Mm-hmm.
right? Chicago, there's a little bit of lake effect depending if there's an easterly component to the wind, but in general, we tend to use the snowfall measured at Chicago O'Hare. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's always someone whose job is to measure it. We have a long historical record, so insurance underwriters like that. That's good core data for them to calculate premiums, and it's also easy to settle on. It's a disinterested third party, right? So, and if you're a contractor and you were looking for some sort of insurance in Chicago, you're probably pushing snow around the metro area,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we just use O'Hare as a kind of centric to the area, and it's just it represents the metropolitan area as a whole. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
not on any single storm, but over the course of the winter,
Mm-hmm.
it represents well. You get into a place like Cleveland, that can change, right? Cleveland
Mm-hmm.
Hopkins is, not in the ideal situation to pick up lake effect.
Right.
The coastline there on the lake is not uniform. It's got a little dip in it, and so you get over into like Cleveland Heights and some other areas more to the west. I think Cleveland Heights is in the west, right?
The lake effect's on the east side, so the airport is south and west of the city.
South and west. Yes, I'm sorry, I got my
And yeah, so
yeah.
all the lake effect snow is hitting the east side of Cleveland,
East, yes.
which makes the airport in the worst spot possible as far as that goes.
Yeah, best part if you're flying in and out, but worst part if you're trying to
Exactly.
capture.
Right.
So then we can explore other options, which would typically be like a third party
Okay.
verification, company. There are several out there.
Okay. Sure.
We're not really tied to any one, but
Mm-hmm.
that would be up to the underwriter whether they
Okay.
would approve that. Okay.
Got it. Okay.
We would never get into a situation though where a contractor might have 50 properties in and around the Cleveland area
Mm-hmm.
where we're doing one snowfall measurement for each property. That's just too
Got it.
much minutia. It's too
Okay.
much in the weeds. And for the most
Mm-hmm.
part, it doesn't matter from an insurance standpoint. We tend to pick
Okay.
something more centric.
That makes sense. Okay. I just wanted to ask the question because I know there's a lot of
Sure.
contractors that are really, have that connection, really close connection with a weather service, their third party preferred vendor, and they would certainly want to try to integrate that into the offering.
Yep.
So can you walk us through, just so you gave us the example of Chicago and extreme or a light winter, like how would a contractor, not we probably don't want to go into some detailed math equation, but how would a contractor take that weather product and benefit from it aside from just collecting the proceeds? Like what could they do in terms of their contracts or their pricing model? Because I'm sure you've seen some of those
hmm
things work out in real life. So can you walk us through maybe an example of that?
Yeah, there's we've had instances, excuse me, of where contractors might have a just benefited from obtaining a large contract, right? A big
Hmm.
facility could be a hospital organization or, whatever it might be. And in order to perform that contract, they need to purchase or rent a lot of equipment. They're going to park 6 loaders here, 4 loaders there, etc.
Hmm.
If those loaders aren't moving, that's some money that's out the door. So in
Hmm.
order to kind of, address that risk of all that rental money for all that equipment, that's one piece of how the insurance may be beneficial. You could have, we've done this with a company for years, large snow only company, where they actually collateralize a loan
Hmm.
for operating capital heading into winter. Because they're snow only, they're cash poor,
Hmm.
relatively speaking, going into winter until they start performing services. And so, they've got to have some capital to operate for that first, 30, 45, 60 days.
Hmm.
And the lack of snow insurance policy could then be arranged so that the bank they're getting the loan from could be an additional loss payee on that policy.
Hmm.
So it gives the bank some sort of peace of mind too that the loan payback will be able to be done.
Got it.
Um, yeah, and it gives you some freedom too as a
Hmm.
contractor to maybe you have somebody, maybe it's a really big seasonal,
Hmm.
and it would kind of swamp your overall portfolio. Gives you a little bit of peace of mind that if that seasonal it coincides with a very, very heavy snow winter, you've got that
Hmm.
insurance policy just as a backstop.
Hmm.
And so, there is some peace of mind portion of that as well.
Yeah, I could see a whole portfolio analysis of bringing down your seasonal pricing because you have that insurance policy in place that can offset some of that risk. I would love to be a contractor today and actually go down that road and do the math. Do you see situations, kind of going back to your hospital situation, where the hospital would buy the insurance policy, or is it more
Sure.
typical that the contractor would do it?
No, we have property management companies and landlords, things like that,
Hmm.
that HOAs that buy insurance, municipalities.
Hmm.
We don't do it a lot of municipalities, but we do have several repeats every year where they're basically insuring against an overrun of their overall snow removal budget.
Hmm.
Anybody with the exposure, right? It could be
Hmm.
just a single mom and pop. It could be a large mall, whatever it might be. So who
Hmm.
buys the insurance is really immaterial because whoever has the risk buys the insurance. And
Hmm.
sometimes, that's going to be the property management company. Sometimes it's going to be the snow contractor.
Hmm. Yeah, I was going to say, I saw on your website that you work nationwide. Do the rates for this type of insurance vary quite a bit depending on where you're located? Are they more affordable in the Midwest because people are less litigious versus the East Coast? Or does this type of insurance kind of average out over across the country?
Yeah, it's not. I mean, the prices vary across the country just based on, climate normals of snowfall, right?
Well,
And
sure, of
so
course.
now I wouldn't say prices tend to be more expensive in the Midwest. I would say it's more highly utilized in the Midwest. So capacity becomes an issue as we get closer and closer to winter, because if you think about the insurance carrier protecting their own
Mm,
exposure,
mm, okay.
if they've already got multi-million dollars worth of risk in Chicago and I bring them another
Mm,
$1 million policy, they might not want to take that. Or if they
mm,
want to take it, they might take it, but at a premium. It might be 20% more than the premium would have been for somebody who bought it in August. So it's got it's got that piece of it as well. So I
mm,
always encourage folks to buy earlier rather than later,
mm,
especially if they're in the Midwest. If it was somebody in say Salt Lake City, there's less of an impact on total concentration of risk in an area like that than there would be
mm,
in Chicago, and there would be in Philadelphia and places like that.
mm. Why is there a heavier concentration in the Midwest?
That's a good question, and I really think it has to do with we had this product for quite a while and had some success, but then Chicago had like 3 winters that were relatively heavy winters. I think one was a 78-inch winter, and a
Mm.
couple 64, and I'd have to look at the records
Those are big
specifically.
for Chicago.
Yeah, and so what happened was that spurred from the market a high demand of seasonal
Mm,
contracts. People wanted to get out
mm,
of the time and materials or per push, and they wanted to lock in a seasonal rate. And so from a contractor standpoint, locking in a seasonal rate after coming off of 3 heavy winters, there was a bit of anxiety, if you will. And
mm,
so we started placing quite a bit of coverage in the Chicago area for excess snow. And then, the market, as fickle as it is, a couple years later, now they want to all go back to time and materials because they had a couple of light winters, and then
mm.
we started doing more of the lack of snow in Chicago, and then as that kind of spreads around the metro and then spreads up to Milwaukee and Minneapolis and Detroit, and I think that's just kind of was a natural spread.
Okay. Are most policies focused on covering the higher side, like the heavier winter versus a light winter? Are people picking and choosing one side or the other one on that risk equation? Are they insuring both sides of that equation?
So for snow contractors, the
Right.
majority I would say are looking for lack of snow right
Got it.
now.
Okay.
We've done some other things on the high side. There always is some exposure there for some
Hmm.
contractors. Um, we've done some things where the insurance isn't necessarily there to trigger support for the extra expenses that a contractor would have, but there is like you do a seasonal, it's capped, and we've seen seasonals with caps before. It goes to time and materials after
Hmm.
that, but we have contractors that are doing seasonals that are capped and absolutely no additional cost to the client because it's all insured after that.
Hmm.
All right, so
Mm.
that kind
Got
of
it.
gives them
Okay.
a benefit, or they can carry over that credit
Hmm.
to awards for the next year if you're in a heavy RFP environment, right? So if you've got
Hmm.
a client who you just finished up and it was, maybe they had a seasonal contract, but you had a very light snow. The insurance company would provide based on the policy, et cetera. But let's say they provided a $20,000 payment to the contractor. The contractor can award that in the form of a credit to services next year to their
Hmm.
client. And now when they go to RFP again, they've already got a
Hmm.
$20,000 credit.
Love that idea.
Yeah, so it
Hmm.
helps to lock in a contractor and a relationship with a property or some ownership, landlords, etc. So
Hmm.
lots of different ways you can kind of make
Mm.
this thing malleable.
How long have you been doing this?
I've been doing this for about 18 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know you were involved in some other things before that. I want to talk about that in a minute here. But what else? What am I not asking you? What else would you like to tell to a contractor, since you have a big audience of contractors listening in here?
Well, sometimes the real risk or the risk of concern isn't just lack of snow in the winter. It could be something where, if you get a bunch of heavy storms throughout the winter, and a bunch can be relative to your area, right? So,
Hmm.
you can have policies that are triggered upon the number of times it snows 6 inches or more, and if it happens more than 4 times, then you get paid on number 5, number 6, number 7. Or we've written them where if you get more than a certain amount of snow in, say, a 15-day window, then there's a trigger, a claim paid.
Okay.
Because then you've got labor issues, overtime, breakage. I mean, all kinds of things go on when it just seems to snow and snow and snow for every other day, and you can never get caught up, both labor wise and just financially can be a strain. So
someone really just needs to. Yeah, someone just needs to reach out to you and have a conversation, or someone on your team, and articulate what their challenges are, what their issues, where they see risk, and where they might want some coverage. But there's so many different options here. It's really super interesting, all the creative options. I want to move on to another topic. So, is there anything else that we're missing here?
I think you hit it on the head. Is that I like to say we have a box of Legos. And so we have that conversation about, what is the concern, what is the risk, et cetera. And then we can use those Legos to build something unique to that contractor. And so that all starts with the conversation, and probably the biggest challenge is then to figure out the monetization. Here's the problem, but what does it cost you financially? And that's just pen to paper, and we can figure that out easy enough.
Well, I want to start venturing into your background, because I'm dying to find out how you got into this line of work. This is really interesting.
Yeah. So I was a research meteorologist at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and I had a friend of mine that had left the university, also worked there, and went into the commodity trading business. Energy. We all remember I shouldn't say we all, but if you're above a certain age, you probably remember Enron. And so Enron was a competitor of this particular company. And so what happened was I got a call from my friend and said, we need your meteorology skills, because my background was more in data acquisition and quality control. And so I went there and I worked for a couple of years until the Enron thing hit, and then it kind of spiraled the business down. But we started a new company that worked in weather derivatives. And weather derivatives are utilized by lots of different companies, all kinds of derivatives, whether it's interest rate or currency or price, etc. But in the snow industry, you might remember a time when you could trade snow contracts on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. They're still there, but in reality, you need to be an eligible contract participant, and contractors weren't really aware of the tax implications of doing so, and all these other nuances that made it challenging. And the company we formed eventually got purchased by a insurance company. And so then I said, let's do this with insurance. We don't have to do it on a derivative basis. Let's make this insurance policies. That way the taxation's easy. There is none really. And, it's a business expense like any other insurance policy. And then we can open it up to everybody, and we'll just, talk to some contractors. And we went to some early SIMAs and some other events, and met a few folks in the industry. One of my best friends in the industry, you know him well, Troy Clogg. I met him early on, and we've been friends ever since, and have worked through a lot of different issues and a lot of different what ifs, and so it's just kind of snowballed, pun intended, from there, and so that's kind of how we got started.
And there may or may not have been some bourbon involved in those conversations with Troy Clogg.
Met Troy.
That's for another episode. So, what is your educational background?
So I have a couple degrees in meteorology. Technically, one the degree that actually says bachelor's in meteorology and then master's in atmospheric science. Same verse, just a change of words, same thing.
Okay, all right.
And then I worked for the university for 8 years after graduate school. And you want me to tell the rest of the story, don't you?
Well, I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you to tell us about Holmes Ridge.
Yeah. Okay.
So there you go. That's going to open up the door. Yeah.
So Yeah, when I worked for the university, I mentioned I was data acquisition. Basically, that was my job, and I I worked on a National Science Foundation grant. Kind of ran the grant towards the end, but to put automated weather stations in the Antarctic. And so every year, every austral summer, which is North American winter, I would go down to Antarctica and be down there for 5 or 6 weeks, and then travel around by sometimes if we were close to the base, I could take a four-wheel drive pickup. Other times, snowmobile, a
Mhm.
helicopter, different types of airplanes landing out in the middle of nowhere, putting up a weather station.
It's
And so
crazy.
that's what I did for 9 years. And then, or I should say, 8 years, 9 trips. And
Hmm.
then I left to go to the weather derivatives company. Um,
Okay.
in that 9 years, when I first went, I was single. My last trip, I was married and had 3 children. So that kind of
Oh,
changes your perspective of
it's
being,
not the same.
exactly. And this is well before, we had phones with internet and stuff. We did have some
Hmm.
internet connectivity down there for scientific purposes, but it wasn't like now. You didn't surf and watch videos or anything like that. You sent text messages briefly. The Holmes Ridge was that was quite an honor. They named a mountain ridge after me, the United States Geological Survey, and basically as recognition of the efforts put into putting all those weather stations in, and my thesis work actually was using that
Congrats.
data. Thank you. To improve the safety of aircraft operations in the
Mm-hmm.
Antarctic. So I developed some forecasting techniques through that, and so yeah, it was quite an honor.
Hmm.
And when people ask me about Holmes Ridge, I just say, well, you can Google it, and that gives kind
I'm
of
going
a
to.
quick synopsis. But
I'm going to. And so back to your company, you've well, again, congratulations and thank you for sharing that story. I had no idea that was in your background until I read your bio on it. I said we have to talk about this. People need to know.
yeah, thank
Um,
you.
let's go back to your company here real quick. You recently added some people to your team. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we did. We expanded quite a bit this spring. We brought my middle daughter and my son on board, and so along with my wife Teresa, who many in the snow industry have met, we now have my daughter and my son working for us. And so as we continue to grow, we needed more human resources, if you will,
Hmm.
and both kids were in a spot where they were looking for a change. So. Um, we invite them to come on board, and they've got their insurance. They pass their insurance exams, and
Hmm.
they're all licensed up. And Dad's putting them to work. And yeah, it's been a blast so far.
Hmm.
It's nice to have a family-run business where the family's all together, and this is it all operates at our house. This is
Hmm.
we have an outside building that the company resides in, so the commute is a short little walk, but it's really nice to have the
Nice.
kids here and just have them be enthusiastic about it.
Hmm.
You'll probably see one or two at the next Simon convention or other snow related industry event
Sure.
here in the coming months.
Fantastic. I love that. And you're involved in so many associations. I'm sure it's great to have just some more resource to divide and conquer, to get the message out there. But
Yep.
well, I'm going to give it the last word. So I think we're good. We're not in a rush. If there's something I missed, let's talk about it. How do you want to wrap things up?
Well, I mean, I guess I would say, I don't really. People ask me, how do you like selling insurance? I'm like, I don't sell insurance. I educate
Hmm.
people. So the key component is just educating people and let them make the decision on, is it a right for their company or not for their company. If it's not,
Hmm.
that's fine. If I've given them all the information that they need to make the best decision for their company, then I've done my job. Everything else just kind of will take care of itself. And so that's kind of how we go about, operating our business.
Hmm.
And it's worked out well. And along the way, you meet some pretty neat people. It's pretty nice people. You make some lasting friendships and relationships. And
Hmm.
the bottom line at the end of the day, we all just want to be kind to each other. So that's what I'd leave it. Let's all just be kind and, be good humans.
Great. I love that. How can someone get in touch with you if they want to chat?
We can always reach on our website. That's spectrumwx.com. And my email address is on there. Our phone number is on there. My phone number, I'll just say it here, is 816-810-2346. We do quite a bit on the phone. I know the world's moving to, InsurTech and automatic and AI and all this other stuff, but I'm a bit old school. I like to answer the phone when people call. And so,
good for you.
Our phones are busy. And if we don't answer, and leave a message, we'll call you back. But
good.
Yeah.
Excellent. Robert, thank you so much. This has been awesome. Really appreciate you taking time out to share some of this with us. Some people listening to this had no idea these products were available and are probably their minds blown and they're rethinking their contract strategies. Those people need to reach out and have a conversation with you. So I hope you do if you're listening to this. Yeah.
Well, Phil, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And if anybody has any questions, we're always here to answer them for them and help.
Great. Thank you, Robert.
Thanks, Phil.
Running a snow business isn't getting any easier, but you don't have to figure it out alone. Join us at Grow Snow from Snowfighters Institute, where you'll learn proven strategies to improve sales, operations, hiring, and profitability from contractors who do it every day. Invest 2 days now to build a stronger, more profitable snow business. Register today at snowfightersinstitute.com. Hope to see you there.